Yeah, hey, Thursday is here. Excited to get the show kicked off today. And I'm going to see if I can figure out. See, this would be cool. I guess the way to do it is to put the mic like this. Maybe. And, I think probably actually just move the table to the desk up. Does that work? It's not good for me, really. I probably need like a mic stand, and then I'll have the mic in front of me. But yeah, so I'm gonna, this one doesn't have like an extensible mic stand. It does have like a way that you can switch it here. I see. It's like kind of pointed at me, and it just isn't that tall. I'm trying to think maybe there's something I can put it on. Just get it up here, but it would need another. I don't know. There might be a boom. I'm gonna research this after the show and see what I come up with. Yeah. Today, honestly, like, super exciting stuff today. Like a lot of really good stuff. I had another good meeting with the guys at SoRent. Still working through some Apollo stuff, and that actually brought up this, like, there's still like a lot of like complexity in using email to cold email, outbound email, outreach, whatever you want to call it, to send email. And the setup and the configuration I just explained, I'm like, after doing this work, really, I have been working on this for almost 10 years. And I mentioned there was a period of time where I said, was doing services around cold email, and sent roughly 4 million B2B emails, which that's a lot of emails, honestly. And actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't target. So there was quite a bit more emails than that. And, I learned a lot, and I've continued to send email and work through this. It changes a lot over time. And it's just something that's really complex technically and creatively. And there's so much more to it than just like, hey, I'm just going to send a bunch of emails. And so I'm super excited also because today I got my first sponsor for the show related to email, which is Warm Up IP. I had some fun with AI and created this cool background for their logo. And I love Doggy, the founder, the guy who runs this company. He has some other products, tech products related to email delivery. And like when I say, hey, I sent 4 million to people, I mean, this guy, Doggy's sending like 100 million emails. I don't even know, like a huge volume, right? Like his customers are people who send huge volumes, like, some of the use cases in particular in e-commerce, right? Like if you go from, 25% open rate in e-commerce to the kind of crazy stuff he's getting, we're talking like, you may not get this at 100,000, sends a week or but he's getting, like, we're talking like 90% open rate. So it can be hard. Like you could be like working hard to do everything right, and you're like trying to be happy with the 30% open rate, and then you go to 90, and no matter what anybody says about Apple and all this, the data is not real and all this. Look, 30 versus 90, 90's bigger, 90's better, and whatever's going on in that 90 is probably going on in your 30 too, the hallucinations or false opens and all that. So, 90% is way better than 30%. And I have personally gotten those kind of results using SendCrux, which is his other product. And Warm Up IP is, more focused specifically on warming up mailboxes. Great for corporate mailboxes. You just, as long as you can connect your mailbox in, and his stuff is super advanced, right? AI creates the message, so it looks all real. It's way more advanced than what you're going to get from anybody else. So super excited to have them as a sponsor. I'm going to be doing a lot more email content because honestly, it's in business land, growth land, you really need email, whether it's as part of your frontline strategy. If you're building an army and you're like, hey, I need infantry, you need email, right? You don't skip the infantry just because you want to be, strategically focused on your airborne forces. You still need infantry somewhere along the line, and you need to be good at it. So, this is the way to go. So I'm going to talk today more specifically about like how email tracking works, subdomains, and in particular, we had this deep conversation about how do subdomains work. And I'm going to share my screen. I did some research on this, and I'm going to show some Notebook LM, and then kind of show the output from that, and just talk about this. The visual on this isn't the best, but it's going to just be, I think I can expand this completely. I can maximize this. Close this little window here. So how email tracking works, right? And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I'm going to talk about the basic idea. So, and it's funny because this same idea is one of the main features of it was one of the ways that I made, differentiate myself when I was developing applications on the QuickBase platform. And this is probably applicable to, if you're getting into technical solutions and kind of, hacking platforms or SaaS. One of the ways to do that is what's called JavaScript injection. And in this case, we weren't doing this with email. We were doing this by inserting an image pixel into a field in QuickBase, which would allow to load JavaScript. If you understand how a little bit, if you're a developer, you know this stuff. If you're not, the simple situation is that when code loads in the internet, right? It gets transferred across the internet, it comes into your browser, and now that code is sitting in your browser. And that code is sitting in your browser, and you okay, I have to send a code here. I've got 5 different things going on, and right in the middle of my show, of course. And anyway, so I'm gonna pop back the video here for a second and just share. So this is we're talking JavaScript injection, and what we would do is we would load a job. First, you just load a little bit of JavaScript. It would have this. So it's hey, I'm gonna load a little bit of JavaScript. So now I have a script. I have some code that can execute inside the browser window, right? And it can do all kinds of things, and there's a lot of concern about JavaScript injection because it presents security risks and all this stuff. And yes, it does. And eventually, QuickBase should have other ways to do things. And what we basically did was we would just load these really insane, kind of complicated, sophisticated interfaces out of QuickBase, so they were sort of part of the overall user experience, but creating super rich, complex, interfaces, using very, over time, more and more mature versions of JavaScript, and really kind of cool interactive interfaces and things. And it was all really early on enabled, but with JavaScript injection, because that was the only way it would work. And that works by you have a pixel on the page. When the page loads, the pixel goes. It says, "Hey, go on load, right? Go get this file." And then once the file comes, now as long as JavaScript is enabled, then you basically you can do all kinds of things with, you can modify things on the screen using DOM or document object model, or call API calls, all these different things. So that's pretty much what happens with email tracking. Is when you send email with tracking, you know, what happens is it has like a pixel, right? A single pixel, and that pixel is an image. Like it's like it's going to load an image, right? And it's going to load that image from whatever like URL is specified, and so typically what happens is like email tracking software, they say, okay, you want to put the image that you're going to load should be on the same server, right, or at the same domain name or a subdomain of the the domain that you're emailing from. So that way it helps kind of like, okay, like you're not just going and saying go wrote a random image, you're saying, okay, it's associated with your domain. That improves the trust. And then in your DNS, you're going to say, hey, like route any request that comes to this subdomain using a CNAME. You're going to point it to like back to whatever instructions, the emailing tool like Apollo or whatever they say, this tracking, however their tracking set up, HubSpot will have the same thing. And so then what's going to happen is that HTTP request goes out to go say, hey, I'll go get an image, but there's no real actual image there. But that request gets sent, routed to XYZ server for Apollo, and inside of an HTTP request, you have a header, you have all this information about like where it came from, contextual information, and that gets used for link tracking. There's open tracking. There's other ways to sort of open and link tracking basically. Yeah, with open tracking, it's it's probably an on load, and then link tracking is going to be what they do is they reroute. Like, so they'll say, okay, you rewrite the URL to your link, it points back to a server, then it tracks it, and then it reroutes it. So it's maybe a little bit different process, let's say, for link tracking, and that's how it works, right? And the other piece of this is you get into this question of like, okay, like where does this stuff get routed to? And that's why in most of these platforms or tools we ask you to say, set up a custom subdomain. So it'd be like, let's say like I'm strategist, I have track.strategist.com. So that way the email system isn't like, when email systems in these technical environments, when they see something that looks fishy, right, it's sort of like it can trigger things. And so by having an email and then you say, hey, go check out this link, and or whatever, the link is on some other site, that's more suspicious because you're moving outside of your domain. Things inside of your domain are going to be more trusted. And that's the reason why, in general, the recommendation is to do this kind of tracking configuration with a subdomain that is inside of your domain. And this gets complicated when you get into large companies, corporate environments, right? I mean, look, even myself, when I've got to go in and mess with my DNS, it's a little scary, right? And I have lots of domains. I've spent tons of time messing with my DNS and adding CNAMEs and, like DKIM and all these other kind of deliverability things. And, when you get to a bit larger companies, domains with big reputations, there can be a pretty good process to go through and sort all this out. So I also put together a cool, chart here to kind of talk about how this works. So classic is, email sent, a 1-by-1 GIF pixel goes out, hits the email server. Here it is. It's in the email. It goes out in the email. The email client loads the content, right? The content, and it triggers the pixel. There's the data then gets collected if you follow this, and it goes back to the original, say, sending email server. This is kind of one piece of it. There's a lot of talk, and I'm not going to get into this in detail today because of how Apple is, the Apple Mail messes things up. I mean, to be honest, there's lots of things that mess up opens in particular, right? So Apple in general creates a false open because there's like, probably the best way of looking at it is there's like these proxy servers that open everything, right? So that's going to trigger it. And then they reroute the email through a new server with, all the, and you lose all this contextual information, right? So by using this proxy, they store the information privately and can route the email, but don't ever have to send this localized information back or outside of it through these HTTP requests. I mean, hey, great, protects people's privacy, but yes, it negatively affects this. For B2B email, probably not a huge thing, right? Like if you're in the B2B world, now there may be people using Apple Mail, but for the most part, the B2B world, you've got Google Workspace and you have Microsoft. When you get into a corporate type B2B sending, this is going to be much less of an issue, right? So, custom, the custom subdomain, right? This talks about how you're, essentially what you're, I'm not going to get into the details. You can see on the left side, right? You create a CNAME record. So a CNAME record sort of says, hey, when at the DNS level, when you see like this pattern, track.yourcompany.com, then essentially reroute that to that traffic somewhere else, right? And so you then get to put your company's link into, it looks like it's your link, but that actually behind the scenes, right, you're sending data back into whatever location it is. Or the same thing with this, like click tracking URLs, right? It looks like your URL, but it gets routed, data gets tracked, and it gets basically routed to whatever collection location it is. So why do this? This isn't, I would say, on a scale, on a rank level of deliverability, custom subdomain is, it's an important configuration. It was surprising because I could not figure out in Apollo, and maybe it was just turned off in this setup. I could not figure out how to use their default. I couldn't figure out how to do tracking without the custom subdomain. Maybe they turned it on. Maybe it's like, hey, you want track? Use a custom subdomain. I'll have to research that more. But a lot of tools will let you use like their just generic tracking, and you're kind of caught up in this trap of like, hey, you're putting a URL into your email that's a known URL that's probably used for tracking. It's going to be a little bit of like a yellow flag, right? Like, hey, this email could be spam or something, and so. It's good. Definitely a best practice. It's going to improve deliverability, give you a little bit more brand. It's the right way to do this. There's a lot of other deliverability things to do as well, like send great content, but, definitely you have to make sure your domain is configured properly, use good data, and, as part of the configuration, use these tracking subdomains. So, anyway, hopefully this is helpful and informative, useful explanation. Let's see, there was something else. Shield betting. No, that was it. I think. What is the protocol in email? Yeah, I did a separate chat. It's the HTTP protocol, right? So it's part of the HTTP protocol. It's actually at some point I'll probably, it's funny because if you get into like really down deep into the technology, like these protocols matter a lot, right? Like, okay, when you get into like really complex web applications or data transmission, understanding the protocol, like, okay, how does this data transmit and like what are the rules, right? This is, HTTP is, go back, you research history of the internet, right? It all came down to like establishing HTTPS, as the framework for how messaging occurs on the internet and like what is allowed to be sent and the format of what, that's what a protocol is, right? It's like, hey, this is a framework for how a message is going to be transmitted. And that was the beginning of the internet, right? Once that got said, hey, people got, there was, I don't know, there's history. Someday I'll pull it all up, talk about it. And HTTP gets created. And now you're saying, okay, digitally, we're going to send this HTTP request over here. It's going to ask for something, and I'm going to get a response, right? And then there's a certain format expectation for what's contained in that. And so email actually gets transferred, is not necessarily sent via HTTP, but it's generally opened in a browser, right? Which, that's typically the case. And then that browser will support the HTTP request to go get an image, for example. So as long as, actually, like, a lot of times, like, things like delivery status and read receipts, those are actually occurring over SMTP, which is the mail protocol. So the HTTP gets triggered by, like, the email client or the browser. When the email opens, it's like, okay, it's going to be able to read, HTML data, or read HTML in the email, which HTML is sort of the format for, and then that gets transmitted via HTTP when you, like, when the image, fires, when the pixel fires, or when you click on the link. So that's basically how it works. And hopefully this is really a layman's introduction, and hopefully it's valuable for some people, and excited to share this around. And huge thanks to sponsors. I'm me, strategist. I do offer services around helping set up growth systems and strategic problem solving. So you certainly look me up. I'm going to be building out my site more to actually indicate how I offer these services. First real legit paid sponsor, Warm Up IP. It's my buddy Nagi, awesome guy, smartest guy ever when it comes to email. I'm excited. He's getting, I got to get him on a show. That's another next week. It looks like I'll have my first live event version of this. So these are just impromptu, and excited to do that. And then also shout out to Oceanic, my buddy Chris, who has a great project going around building the platform to build AI platforms. And every time I see what he's up to, I've learned. I feel like I am able to stay on the forefront of AI just by watching what he's up to in Oceanic. So check this out. DM me on LinkedIn if you want to chat, talk strategy, and excited to the